Hands can tell the story of a million words never spoken. My hands were used for holding that of another, interlaced, a mere spark of passion to come. These hands have labored to write my thoughts and life. A person with rough hands is no stranger to work. A person with nails bitten and bloody is usually anxious and apprehensive. A soft manicured hand is not a construction worker. My hands have held my nieces and nephew. My fingers have been on the trigger of a gun pointed at another human being. My fingernails are bitten and I have rough palms. My hands are tattooed with a story of war, regret, yet pride. My knuckles read vet to show the sacrifice I made for you. To show you I would have given my life for you. I want everyone to know. I have broken rifles that are so much more to me than pictures. They represent my guilt, my disenchantment for the army, and most of all, that I wish to never have my hands on any trigger of any gun that could claim the life of another human being.
Ahmed. The children lying in the roads of Iraq begging for food filled me with guilt, cynicism, and anger. Yet Ahmed, who has been raped by this war, raped of his youth, raped of his body, raped of his sight, raped of his home, raped of his freedom, has no cynicism in his thoughts. He gives love and trust without fear. He grabs my hand and yells, "Run! Run, please! Please run!" He's a 9-year-old boy who wants to run. He's a 9-year-old boy who can't run without someone to lead him, to stop him before the curve, before the tree, before the car that he cannot see. He's a 9-year-old boy who wants to stomp his feet and twist to pop music. He's a 9-year-old boy that teaches himself to play the piano. He's a 9-year-old boy that is a bird that knows no barbed wire. He's a 9-year-old boy that is my guardian angel, constantly reminding me that life is for love and trust, not cynicism and anger. Ahmed Jabbar Sharaf is my friend.
You are not my enemy, my brother, my sister, but I have done something wrong, and perhaps I am now yours. I went to your home, and I went inside, soiled your rug and bullied your children. You were not my enemy, my mother, my father. I drove on you, threw garbage into your window, burned your garden and spit in your water. You were not my enemy, my grandmother, my grandfather. I built walls between us. Rubble made sound. Sand scattered plastic bags. All around rifles and checkpoints. Bright lights into your eyes. No, you are not my enemy, my partner, my friend. We were betrayed. You are not my enemy, my child, myself. Our blood's the same. You are not my enemy, my memories in rage, remaking sense now. Together. You are not my enemy, and you never were. You are a part of me, as I am with you. You are not my enemy. We will stay true. You are not my enemy. We can change this with you. You are not my enemy. There's no difference between all of the horrible things that we say to each other, whether it be gook, or red, or haji.
Women wailing. Women wailing, all in black. Such an outpouring of grief. Vocal, physical, collective mourning. When did we forget how to mourn? As a country, as individuals. Where is my grief? What do I mourn for? Rarely it comes, but it comes in waves, sobbing for what has been lost, for all of us, for humanity. For that old man throwing himself on the ground over and over and over, screaming and grabbing his head. The loss surrounds us forever, as it always was and always will be.
Platoon leader Brian Brennan's Humvee hit an IED in Afghanistan. He woke up in a VA polytrauma center.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know why I was in a hospital, because last time I remember I was in Afghanistan, and I was like, well, I'm in a hospital? And then they were like, yeah, you're in Tampa Bay. And I was like, for what? And then I looked down and I realized that that's why I was there.
Do 10 of those?
In the 4 weeks since that day, Brennan is focused on regaining enough strength to walk. His rehab was pretty traditional.
It should be a relaxed movement.
Until recreation therapist Jamie Kaplan suggested something different: yoga.
We like to think outside the box here at the James A. Haley VA, and so yoga was something that was definitely outside the box. With people that use prosthetics, such as Brian, to help them walk, they need a lot of trunk control. So yoga really helps with that body trunk control, and so it's going to help him with his walking.
That's how we're going to start class. Get nice and straight with your spine.
Over the past year, yoga teacher Annie Okerlund and her staff have been working with VA therapists, teaching yoga to recovering veterans and active duty service members. They do it once a week, volunteering their time.
Lift straight up. Good. Any type of thing that you can do for your body to keep your joints open, blood flow, any blood flow, especially during the healing process, is huge. And relax your arms.
But convincing these patients to give yoga a chance can be a challenge.
You get just this very broad, very macho, bite the head off a rattlesnake type mentality that comes into the hospital, and you tell them we're going to do something like yoga, and they think you're telling them a joke.
That's what veteran Dustin Brink thought when Kaplan suggested that yoga would help him cope with lingering symptoms of his traumatic brain injury. But Brink soon changed his mind.
Lift your chest, breathe.
I was laughing on the inside. I was like, yoga, who's that for? Girls. And I got to yoga and I found out it is for me. It's a good thing.
In through the nose and out through the nose. And just start to slow down.
The class's meditative effect allows Brink and patients like him to develop relaxation skills to help them deal with their emotions.
And let's just rest here for a couple moments more.
Because, you know, being in the war and fighting that PTSD, I get a lot of bad thoughts all the time.
Shoulders are soft.
So what we try and focus with Dustin is some of the deep breathing and relaxation techniques, things that would help him when he starts to get agitated, when he starts to get anxious.
It calms me down. And that's a very big deal right now.
So it's an inhale through the nose, exhale through the nose.
These sessions are tailored specifically to these patients' capabilities.
There's 18, 20 people in this room. There's 18, 20 different bodies. So we just modify the pose for you. With soldiers of different abilities, we use modifications. So an amputee can do a similar version of a pose to someone with a traumatic brain injury. Maybe with the brain injury, we'll bring their head up higher than their heart, where the amputee, we might lift their legs or their residual limbs higher than their heart. Reach out through your hamstring. Yeah, engage, keep that engaged, and then a little fold.
It was good. I was able to relax, I was able to stretch, I was able to do a lot of stuff that I usually don't do.
And the therapists stick close, making sure patients don't injure themselves.
Almost like you're folding your body at the same time. And she relies upon us as the therapist for our expertise in our specific knowledge areas, just as we rely upon her for her expertise in the yoga program.
If your neck feels good, you can look over your left shoulder.
In the beginning of a class, a patient may need our full assistance, and by the end of, 3, 4, 5 weeks as we're into it, we may just be there handing them a towel and a bottle of water at the end of class, and that's what we like to see, that progression of therapy, that progression in the yoga experience.
Namaste.
Brennan is already showing progress. Yoga's calming effect is helping him come to peace with his situation, and the strength he gains from it will help him take his next steps towards recovery.
There's always some benefit to it. It may not be a physical benefit, it may be a psychological benefit, it may be a psychosocial benefit. And in yoga, those are the types of things we look for: mind, body, and spirit.
I was hid behind a big tree that was knocked down or fallen, and I could see these Germans in the woods across this big field, and I saw this young kid crawling up a ditch straight towards my tree. So I let him crawl. I didn't fire at him, but when he got up within 3 or 4 foot of me, I screamed at him to surrender. And instead of surrendering, he started to pull his gun towards me, which was instant death for him. But this young man, he was blonde, blue eyes, fair skin, so handsome. He was like a little angel. But I still had to shoot him. And it didn't bother me the first night because I went to sleep and I was so tired. But the second night, I woke up crying because that kid was there. And to this day, I wake up many nights crying over this kid. I still see him in my dreams, and I don't know how to get him off my mind.
We always approach these with respect for the voice of the individual person and with the desire to really tell their story the way that that person would be best represented or most would want to represent themselves. And I think that vision really lines up with the StoryCorps vision.
The great thing about StoryCorps is that anybody can come in and do an interview at their booths. So there's not a filtering process of people having to try to sell their story to say, am I good enough to come tell my story? StoryCorps is open to anybody that wants to come.
StoryCorps was started in 2001 by Dave Isay, who previous to starting StoryCorps, he was a radio documentarian. I don't think anyone ever quite understood how big StoryCorps would become. It started with one booth in Grand Central Station in New York with the idea that people could come in, sit down with a friend or loved one for about 40 minutes and tell the story of their life. You could interview someone and ask them questions about their life and pass it on to future generations at the Library of Congress. People found this experience really important, and since then it's grown. We have a booth now in Atlanta, one in San Francisco, and another one in New York that live there permanently, as well as another traveling booth west of the Mississippi where people come in and tell the stories of their lives.
That's a way in which everyday lives are recorded and preserved for the future, and it's a way of getting history out there and history as people experience it on an everyday basis. It's like a sound portrait of life in America, but I guess it's a different version from what you may read on the history books. It just adds an additional component to that.
It's so important to have our histories recorded as a country, the details of our lives, the things we live through, to have those recorded nationally, and also to sit down with someone that you love and honor them by asking them some important questions, saying, what was your happiest moment in life? What was your saddest moment in life? Who was your biggest inspiration? And to make sure that you learn those things about the people you love.
ran our lives with a whiteboard and dry erase markers to keep everybody's schedules together. We were vibrant, healthy, run around town family with kids bailing out of minivans. I was managing an accounting office. I'd been a paralegal and legal secretary for about 16 years. I was supporting Al as a police officer's wife. Christy, at the time, our daughter, was playing softball and running cross country. And Alan, he talked about becoming a nurse or a physical therapist or personal training. But after the events of September 11th, Alan started talking about joining the military and doing something where it would help people. It was at 7:30 in the morning on March 31st, 2003. Alan had been assisting the platoon sergeant for over 3.5 hours when a call for a medic rang out, and there had been some of them positioned on a bridge over the Euphrates River, and we were told that Alan immediately left his covered position and ran through fire to help the wounded soldier, and he was hit in the abdomen with small arms fire. Our lives very different.
When Alan got injured, it was a big change for our family. I think I was naive about war and what it entailed, and we live in such a sheltered society that, to me, that was a completely different universe, what he was going to do, and I guess when he talked to me about it, I just never really thought that could happen to us, and it did.
Christy was 16 years old when Alan was wounded, and so I went from being very involved on the board of parent committees and booster clubs to Christy having no mom, because we dropped everything and left for Washington, D.C. to be at Alan's bedside, and was physically gone from Christy for 9 months. And then even when Alan came back to Austin and was at the rehab center for 14 months, then I commuted from Round Rock to Austin every day. Christy gave up a lot, but we were blessed that our daughter wanted us to take care of her big brother. He was expected to be bedridden, then later to spend a life in a wheelchair. But in the last few months, we've been walking on sit to stand.
You need to get his face while he's doing this, because he's got a big old smile.
It's the face of determination and hope.
1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
This week, we're celebrating Alan's survival.
We take advantage of as many clinics and as many sporting events as we possibly can throughout the year.
3rd year at the clinic. And you'll get to ski both Tuesday
and Thursday, and rock climbing and scuba diving.
What are you most looking forward to?
Skiing.
That first year, he did sled hockey. Didn't do all that well. Wasn't nearly as strong as he is today. But he got out there and he tried, and that's what we always ask of him now, is just give it a shot, see how you do, and we'll go from there. The sky's the limit as far as we're concerned with Alan.
My name is Kevin Sims.
My name is Trey Heptig.
I served in the United States Navy from 1987 to 1996.
I was discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell March of 1999.
At the end of my second re-enlistment, I decided not to. One of the main reasons not to re-enlist was because of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. I felt like eventually I might have gotten caught. Before I enlisted in the Navy, I wasn't living out as a openly gay man.
I did go in knowing that I date women, and the Army isn't really down with that. And so when I'm doing the final in-processing paperwork before I got shipped out, they were like, oh, well, you have to go in this room and there's a tape recorded message. You just got to push play on the tape recorder and listen to that message and then come back out and sign this paper that said you heard the tape. And that's what the tape that said all this stuff about you will not engage in homosexual activity, you will not attempt to marry anyone of the same sex, you will not attempt to have any physical contact with someone of the same sex. There was like a big long list of things that you could not do with the same sex, and there was no paperwork that said, like you will not be homosexual in the military, but you go in, you listen to that tape, and then you sign a paper that says you listen to a tape.
The don't ask, don't tell policy, I think that came into effect while I was in the Navy. But I always assumed, you could still get in trouble for it. I really had to hide who I was. Even on the original contracts, they asked you, are you homosexual or not? And obviously I put not.
Hiding my identity it definitely didn't feel good. Politically, pretty much everybody on the military base is very heteronormative in thought. They're they all talk about their spouse, their wives. I feel like I was lacking a sense of camaraderie with the other soldiers because they could go out and party and meet people, and I wasn't really interested in going out and getting drunk all like everybody else, but it was very lonely and isolating.
When I first enlisted, I really wasn't worrying about my sexual orientation because here I am about to get this education, travel to, I don't know, who knows where, and serve the country. So, and I was young, so it wasn't really a thought for me, for my orientation. But then as I was in and I grew older and matured, it started coming to me that, wow, I really can't live the way I want to live. As years passed, and it made me depressed. I had low self-esteem, so for a while in the Navy, I decided I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to eat, sleep, and work. So that went on for a while because I couldn't go to the chaplain, I couldn't go to a Navy psychologist, and I was too afraid to go to a civilian psych because it was like, who knows who's going to find out, what they're going to do once, if I was told.
I wrote a letter to my sergeant, and it was kind of a heartfelt letter. I said, well, this is just like something I'm tired of hiding, and it was kind of a long letter, and then he called me when he got the letter, and he was, he could tell that I was in emotional pain and stuff. He said, well, I'm going to have to tell the CO about this. Once you tell me this stuff, I can't just pretend I don't know. So, and then he told the commanding officer, and then the discharge started happening.
Well, after I got out, it was just learning myself again, figuring out who I was, and it was really good not to worry about going to, looking over my shoulder going into a gay establishment or who I was walking down the street with. It was a load off of me.
A lot of people say that, if the gays are allowed to be in the military, then everybody's going to be scared to be around them or bunk with them, and it might lower morale. And I really feel like if somebody has negative opinions, or if somebody would prefer that their battle buddy be in the closet and deny who they are, I would wonder about whether that person has a good grasp on reality. If that person prefers this alternate reality where people are hiding who they are, then what are they doing with a shotgun? That's what I don't think that's a very good idea. So I think it will bring people together to know that everybody can actually be themselves and be who they are and bring that to that organization.
People wants to join, to serve our country, and they should be able to, allowed to, no matter what their orientation is. Gay men and women have been serving in the military since the American Revolution, and they're always going to serve. So they should have the opportunity to serve openly.
It was President Abraham Lincoln who set forth a mandate for the government to create national cemeteries. He said the country needed a place for Civil War veterans to be interred. But VA Cemetery Director Paul Martin says it's become more than that.
The most significant thing about the cemetery is that it's a large visual reminder of our freedoms.
Henry Miller.
But some of the soldiers buried here have been overlooked.
Alfred McGill. When I was a child, there wasn't anything really
about African American history in the military, particularly the Civil War. It was like 110 type picture you saw in all the history books.
Radcliffe's history books may have skimmed over the accomplishments of the 178,000 African American Civil War soldiers known as the United States Color Troops. But now, some 150 years later, he and his friends made sure there is a specific site to remember them in Nashville. Radcliffe became the model for a bronze life-size monument dedicated to those soldiers.
The great part is when I go to answer the last alarm, I ain't just gonna be a hole in the ground.
But it wasn't easy. Radcliffe and his friends are USCT reenactors. The stories of the USCT drove Radcliffe and historian Norman Hill to think about raising money to build a memorial to them.
The statue kind of happened from a discussion we'd had after doing a couple of these sessions. There's a lot of statues in the South to Southern Confederate heroes, but there are no statues to black soldiers. There just weren't any. One thing led to another, and we started putting the plans together.
But making a memorial is no easy task. Part of the plan was to call on acclaimed sculptor Roy Butler.
I've always had a very strong interest in history, and especially Tennessee history.
The Tennessee native is known for creating amazing, detailed works of art at the Adonis Bronze Foundry in Utah.
If there's a thing called reincarnation, Bill has got to be reincarnated from a Civil War soldier. He's a very interesting person. He knows all about the history of it. He's very passionate about it, and he lives it, breathes it 24 hours a day.
Butler spent days studying Radcliffe for the sculpture.
We took about 200 photographs in 360 all the way around. He was already in the pose that they had requested. I took pictures of everything, even the little details on his belt, on his holster, the gun, everything.
The second part of the plan called for VA to allow the monument to be placed in Nashville's National Cemetery. Martin says certain criteria had to be met.
It has to show integrity. The intent must be to honor veterans.
While the men waited for the VA's approval, Butler continued to mold and sculpt the statue.
The general public has no idea how long it takes to make a bronze sculpture and what goes into it.
Butler says the transformation of a clay sculpture into a bronze statue can take up to 6 months.
They take my fabrication, whether it be clay, resin, plaster, whatever the medium is, and then they make a silicone rubber mold of it. And then from that silicone rubber mold, waxes are poured.
That shell is then filled with molten bronze heated to 2200 degrees.
It's actually almost like a butterfly. You have to start with the caterpillar and the cocoon, and then it all falls apart and comes back together as a finished product.
Today, the bronze statue sits in the center of the Nashville National Cemetery. 3 years after its dedication, Butler is amazed by the interest in the statue.
I get phone calls from Nashville saying there's still maybe 100 people or 200 people a week that go out to the cemetery and look at this particular sculpture.
That memorial, for example, really sticks out because it seems like a real person there. It's just covered in bronze. You look at it and you feel like sometimes you can talk to it.
Radcliffe sees the monument as a voice for the USCT soldiers who were silenced far too long.
I'm grateful that these men in this cemetery and all the other African American Civil War soldiers, they have a representative.